Many years ago, a friend made this bowl for me from burl wood. A burl is a gnarly growth on a tree. Nobody knows exactly what causes a burl, but trees grow them because of an insult such as insect damage or impact trauma. Its grain is twisted and distorted, which makes the wood very unstable and only useful as a veneer in normal woodworking. However, woodturners love burls because of their dramatic colors and grains, though they can be dangerous to turn due to their weak, unpredictable grain. This maple tree fell in a storm, and I've always wanted to try turning a burl bowl. I know it won't look like my friend's bowl because we all have different shapes in us, and every piece of wood has its own shape inside it. I decided to try the smaller piece first. If I mess it up, I still have a lot more to work with. First, the burl must be cut to fit on the lathe. The bandsaw is perfect for this. The burl then gets a small hole drilled in it so it can be mounted on a screw in the lathe chuck. Check for rough balance, and then remove the chuck and burl to cut one last piece off with the bandsaw. Now we can remount the chuck onto the lathe and move the tailstock up for added stability while it's out of balance. Using a bowl gouge at a fairly slow speed, the crude shape is made round. Once it is mostly round, the general shape of the bowl can be sculpted. First, shape the bottom of the bowl and make a tenon.
Careful when it's so rotten here, you don't want to trust that. I'll probably take all of that off and then build the tenon from there.
A hazard of a burl and rotted wood is how unstable it can be. I'm cutting away a punky section that could slip later in the chuck before forming the tenon. Here I use a gauge to make sure I make the tenon the right size.
Now what we've done is made a tenon on the end. So instead of being screwed in, we can use the chuck jaws on that tenon.
Now begins one of the most fun parts of wood turning, rough shaping the outside and then the inside of the bowl. The bowl gouge is one of the most heavily used and useful wood turning tools. If handled improperly, the lathe can take it and throw it at you, or it can catch in the wood, which at high speed can cause the piece to explosively fragment. The skill is in always presenting a supported, slicing, and very sharp edge to the wood, which is why you see me turning and rotating as I move around the piece. The lathe is the only machine where the piece moves into the cutting bit. If the wood is unstable, it can come apart at high speeds, which is why I always use a face mask, even with such a small piece. As I expected, the wood has lots of cracks and defects. I use different thicknesses of CA glue, super glue, to fill and stabilize the wood and let it dry overnight. When cut, the burl was still green with lots of moisture. After it sat overnight, it shifted and moved as it dried. Normally, a rough turn bowl was set aside for several months, but I'll go ahead and finish this now. It will dry and change shape, which is okay for an art piece. I check the wall thickness with my fingers every now and then, aiming to be as uniform as possible. Turning the inside of the bowl is harder than the outside because it is harder to see, but also because the end of the gouge is extended much farther off the rest, so a catch has a lot more leverage to do damage. Once the bowl is shaped completely, scraping tools can be used to remove all the tool marks left behind. This is fast and reliable because it shears hard and soft fibers to the same depth, so leaves a more uniform finish, unlike sandpaper, which is only used at the very end with care. Now the tenon's job is done, so we turn the bowl around and shape a real bottom to the bowl, using a different set of jaws in the chuck. The very last step is to decide what sort of finish to put on the bowl. I'm using a series of buffing compounds followed by carnauba wax, which gives the bowl a final luster. Could you see the bowl hidden in the burl? It's not perfect, but it sure is colorful and gnarly. I like it. Luckily, even if it is a mediocre art piece, it can still earn its keep for Christmas.